My name is Emma. I'm 29 years old now, but this story started when I was 24. Back then, I had just finished my MBA. I was full of hope, excitement, and dreams of making it big. I had spent years studying hard, working part-time jobs, and trying to build a future. All I wanted was a job where I could grow, learn, and maybe make my parents proud. After weeks of interviews and rejection emails, I finally got a call. It was from a mid-sized marketing company in Chicago. They said they loved my energy and wanted to offer me the position of assistant marketing manager. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was good enough for a fresh graduate. Plus, it had full benefits and a chance to work directly under the vice president of marketing. I was over the moon. I called my mom and cried tears of joy. It felt like my hard work had finally paid off. The company was called Brightpoint Strategies. The office was modern, with glass walls, free snacks, and Friday lunches. Everyone smiled and said hi. People wore smart clothes and carried laptops like trophies. And then I met him. His name was David King. He was the vice president of marketing. Tall, confident, always in a crisp suit. He shook my hand, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "I see potential in you, Emma. Stick with me and you'll rise fast." At the time, I thought he was inspiring. Now I know better. David wasn't a leader. He was a narcissist in a power suit. But I didn't know that then. Not yet. In the first month, everything felt like a dream. I learned new software, helped with social media campaigns, and even got praised during a team meeting. David would nod and say, "Emma, good work," and I'd smile like a child who had just gotten a gold star. I stayed late. I skipped lunch. I wanted to prove myself. One evening, David came into my cubicle around 6:30 p.m. Everyone else had gone home. "You're still here?" he asked. I laughed and said, "Just finishing the report you asked for." He leaned on the desk and smiled. "This is why I picked you. You're hungry. Keep this up and you'll go places." I went home that night walking on air. But soon, little things started to feel strange. At first, David would email me at 11 p.m. Then it was midnight. Then 2 a.m. Sometimes they were just reminders. Other times, they were full assignments. I thought it was a test. So I stayed up late. I replied fast. I wanted him to know I was serious. Then came the weekend work. Then the "can you handle this for me?" tasks that weren't even in my job description. Then the late night texts. At first, the texts were professional. Then they got personal. "Don't burn yourself out. Have you ever dated anyone in the office? You looked stunning today. That dress? Wow." I froze. I didn't know what to do. I told myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe he was just friendly. I didn't want to seem uptight. I didn't want to lose this job I had worked so hard to get. So I didn't respond to the flirty texts. I kept things cold and polite. I stayed professional. And that's when the praise stopped. Suddenly, nothing I did was good enough. My reports had too many errors. My emails were too slow. My attitude was too distant. David started calling me out in front of the team. "Emma, are you even paying attention? Is this your best work? Because it's not good." I expected better from someone with a master's degree. Every time he said it, I felt a piece of me break inside. I started dreading going to work. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot, staring at the office doors, telling myself I could survive another day. I stopped sleeping. I lost weight. I cried in the bathroom between meetings. But I still didn't quit. Because I needed the job. I needed the money. I needed something on my resume. And David knew that. One day, I made a mistake in a spreadsheet. A small one. A decimal point was off. Something that could be fixed in 5 seconds. But David saw it during a team meeting. He slammed the table. This is what happens when we hand responsibility to children. I felt the whole room go quiet. I wanted to disappear. After the meeting, he called me into his office. "I gave you a chance," he said coldly. "You're lucky I don't fire you right now." I apologized. Over and over. I felt like a child again. And then he smiled. A sick, smug smile. "I'm going to save your job," he said. "Because I'm generous. But you'll need to make it up to me." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. Later that night, I told my roommate what was happening. She gasped. "Emma, this is harassment," she said. But I shook my head. I don't have proof. And if I say something, he'll ruin me. He's powerful. Everyone respects him. No one will believe me. She begged me to quit. I said I couldn't. I needed time. I needed a plan. What I didn't know is that David had already started one of his own. The next morning, I came into work to find my desk cleared. My things were in a box. HR called me in and said I was being suspended for violating company data policies. They didn't explain. They didn't answer my questions. Just told me to go home and wait for further instructions. I walked out in tears. That was the day I realized David didn't want me to quit. He wanted to destroy me. When I got home that day, I walked straight past my roommate without saying a word. I dropped the box of my desk things on the floor and sat on the couch in total silence. She asked me what happened. I couldn't even speak. My throat felt tight and my head was spinning. Eventually, I whispered, I think I just got fired, but they're calling it a suspension. She sat next to me and said, Emma, you need to fight this. But I didn't have any fight left. The next few days were a blur. I kept checking my email, hoping for some kind of update from HR. Nothing came. No call. No message. Just silence. I knew what David was doing. He wasn't just firing me. He was erasing me. And it worked. The company shut off my email access. My ID badge didn't work anymore. The coworkers I thought were my friends stopped replying. Nobody asked if I was okay. It was like I had never existed. I stayed in bed for 3 days straight. I cried until I had no tears left. I didn't eat. I didn't shower. I kept thinking, what did I do to deserve this? But the answer was simple. I had made the mistake of rejecting a man who didn't like being told no. On the 4th day, my mom called. I didn't want to answer, but I did. She said, Hey sweetheart, you haven't called in a while. Everything okay at work? I tried to sound normal. I said, yeah, just a busy week. But then she asked, have you been crying? You sound tired. That's when I broke down. I told her everything. I told her about the messages, the pressure, the public humiliation, and how David had set me up to look like I broke company rules. There was a long pause. Then she said, Emma, this is serious. He's not just a bad boss. He's dangerous. She told me to come home for a few days. To get some space. I packed a bag that same night and took the train to my parents' house. It was quiet there. Too quiet. I stared out the window for hours. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't have another job lined up. My savings wouldn't last long. I was scared. One night, I was sitting at the kitchen table and my dad walked in. He poured us both a cup of tea and said, you know, when I was your age, I lost a job too. It made me feel like nothing. I looked up at him. He continued, but then someone told me that people like that only win when you give up. If you walk away now, you're letting him win. I said, I don't even know where to start. He looked at me and said, you start by writing everything down. Every message. Every meeting. Every word you remember. And that's exactly what I did. I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I started typing. I wrote down every inappropriate text. Every strange request. Every moment that made me feel small. I listed the late-night emails. The fake errors in my reports. The day he screamed at me in front of the team. The private conversations where he hinted at things I didn't want to think about. It wasn't just emotional pain anymore. It was evidence. That was the moment something inside me changed. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't scared. I was angry. And I wanted justice. Over the next week, I began to build my case. I contacted 2 former employees I remembered from LinkedIn. One had left 6 months before me. The other had lasted less than a year. I asked if they had ever worked under David. They both said yes. And then both of them said the same thing. He ruined my life. One woman told me David had blacklisted her after she complained to HR. Another said he lied about her performance to make sure she wouldn't get hired anywhere else. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. This was a pattern. He had done this before. Now I had a plan. I started contacting more people. Quietly. I sent private messages to former interns, entry-level workers, even a contractor who had only stayed a few months. Out of 8 people I reached out to, 5 responded. 4 of them had experienced something, unwanted comments, after-hours messages, sudden firings, and public shame. We decided to meet online. A Zoom call, late at night. And during that call, for the first time, I didn't feel alone. There were other women who had been used, broken, and thrown away like I was. We shared screenshots, emails, saved voicemails. One woman had a voice memo where David called her emotional and replaceable. That one made me clench my fists. But it also gave me hope. Because now I had more than just a story. I had proof. The next morning, I reached out to a lawyer. Her name was Olivia Barnes. She specialized in workplace harassment and wrongful termination. She looked through my documents and said one word. Strong. I asked, do I even have a case? She said, you don't have one case. You have several. And you're not alone. She explained that because David had done this to multiple people, we could build a class action complaint and file it with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It would take time. Months, maybe a year. But if we stayed strong, we could hold him accountable. I felt scared. But I also felt stronger than I had in weeks. I agreed. I said, let's do it. That night, I called my roommate and told her everything. She cried. She said, Emma, I'm proud of you. You're doing the right thing. And for the first time, I believed that. I was still unemployed. Still scared about bills. But I had something David didn't expect. I had the truth. And I had people who had been hurt just like me. And together, we were going to fight back. Once I agreed to move forward with the legal case, my lawyer Olivia gave me one clear instruction. She said, do not tell anyone. Not your coworkers. Not old friends. Not even people you trust at that company. This has to stay quiet until we file. I nodded. This would be a silent war. A long one. And I needed to be patient. I returned to my apartment and started rebuilding my life in secret. While David walked around Bright Point's office acting like a king, I was working from my kitchen table, collecting more evidence, talking to more survivors, and writing out every detail I could remember. I created a folder called Truth. Inside it, I had everything. Screenshots of late-night messages from David. Photos of group chats where women warned each other to never be alone with him. Copies of performance reviews he had altered. Emails where he called interns useless and pretty but dumb. Even a calendar entry titled Emma's Punishment Meeting. Every piece made me stronger. We kept things quiet for months. Olivia had built a network of women like me. 10 of us in total. All ex-employees. All ready to speak out. She helped us write sworn statements. She reviewed the timelines. She filed everything with the EOC, our Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We also gave a copy to Bright Point's board of directors, along with a formal legal warning. It was done. Official. Real. Now we waited. No one knew except David. Because the moment that letter reached HR, he knew exactly who had pulled the trigger. A week after the filing, I got a phone call. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it. Emma, the voice said. It was David. I nearly dropped the phone. What do you want? I said. He paused. I don't know what you think you're doing, but it's going to backfire on you. I have powerful friends. You don't. I stayed silent. Then he said, you don't want this fight. Trust me. And he hung up. My hands were shaking. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I called Olivia and told her what he said. She smiled on the other end of the line and said, perfect. We'll include that too. The next day, the company released a statement to all current employees. It said, Bright Point takes all complaints seriously and is cooperating fully with the investigation. What they didn't say was that the man behind the complaints, David King, was still walking into his glass-walled office every morning with a coffee in his hand and a smirk on his face. But things were changing. Little things. A junior employee forwarded me an email thread where David snapped at someone for being too slow. Someone else told me he had been pulled into a surprise HR meeting that lasted 2 hours. One by one, cracks started to show. He canceled meetings without explanation. He skipped his usual Monday morning motivation emails. He started coming in late and leaving early. And then, the intern team was reassigned away from him completely. He was still smiling in front of the company. But behind the scenes, he was panicking. Weeks passed. The pressure grew. Olivia called me with updates. The EOC had accepted our case and was launching a full investigation. That meant they would begin contacting other current employees quietly. They would visit the company, review records, interview witnesses. David's world was no longer safe. And he knew it. Because one morning, I got another call. This time from a blocked number. It was him again. He sounded different. Less angry. More desperate. "Emma," he said. "Let's talk. Just you and me. We can fix this." I laughed. "You don't get to fix anything," I replied. "You broke it. And now you face the consequences." He paused, then said, "You're making a mistake." "No," I told him. "You did. A long time ago." I hung up. It felt good. A few days later, news broke inside the company. David King had been placed on temporary administrative leave pending review. No one was told why. But the people who had worked under him? They knew. My old coworker Sarah sent me a one-line message. "Thank you." I smiled for the first time in a long time. Not because he was suspended, but because the truth was starting to come out. And the walls were closing in. The next few weeks moved fast. The EOC completed the first phase of the investigation. They confirmed that multiple women had experienced harassment, coercion, and retaliation. Brightpoint was forced to bring in a third-party legal team to conduct an internal review. David's office was cleared out. His photo was removed from the company website. Then one day, I got a copy of an internal memo. It said, "Effective immediately, David King is no longer employed by Brightpoint Strategies. We thank him for his service and wish him well." That was it. No apology. No truth. But it didn't matter. Because behind that simple sentence was a war. And we won it. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of my real revenge. Because I wasn't done yet. David had taken more than just my job. He had taken my confidence, my sleep, my peace of mind. Now, I wanted to take something back. Something he would never forget. Even though David had been fired from the company, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. Yes, he lost his job. Yes, he was exposed. But it all happened behind closed doors. The public still didn't know what he had done. There was no news article. No accountability. No apology. I knew this man. He would just move to another company and do the same thing all over again. He'd find another job with a shiny title, another team to control, and more women to hurt. I couldn't let that happen. I needed people to know who he really was. So I called Olivia. I said, "Can I talk about what happened? Online, I mean. On social media or in a blog?" She said, "Legally, yes. But be smart. Don't name the company. Don't say things that can be called false. Just tell your story." That was all I needed to hear. That night, I sat down at my desk and started writing. I wrote like I was talking to a friend. I told the full story, how I got the job, how David treated me, how he slowly broke me down. I wrote about the humiliation, the pressure, and the way I almost gave up. Then I wrote about how I fought back. How I found others who had been hurt. How we took him down together. How the law was finally on our side. I didn't use his name, but anyone who knew him knew exactly who it was. I titled it, "The Boss Who Almost Destroyed Me." I posted it on Reddit first. Then I shared it anonymously on Medium. I didn't expect anything to happen. But by the next morning, it had over 10,000 views. And it wasn't just views. It was comments. Hundreds of them. People saying things like, "I worked for someone just like this. I thought I was alone. Thank you for sharing. This is so familiar it hurts. I hope you're okay. I hope you never stop telling the truth." I cried reading the messages. Not because I was sad, but because I finally felt seen. A week later, a journalist reached out to me. She worked for a major news site. She said she had read my story and wanted to speak. I asked Olivia first. She said as long as I didn't break any legal rules, I was free to share my experience. So I spoke. I told the reporter everything. She asked if others would speak too. I asked the other women from the lawsuit. 5 of them agreed. We were ready. The article was published the following month. The title was bold, 10 women. 1 boss. Years of silence. It didn't say David's full name, but it gave enough details. People in the industry knew exactly who it was. It went viral. People shared it on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. It started a wave of stories from others, stories about bosses like David, about toxic workplaces, about people who used power to hurt others. And then the real storm came. A tech blog picked up the story and did their own digging. They found that David had been quietly hired as a consultant by another firm just 3 weeks after being fired. When they reached out for comment, the new company panicked. Within hours, they removed his name from their website. David was gone again. This time, in full public view. I got another call from a blocked number. I didn't answer. This time, he left a voicemail. All he said was, "You win." I played it once, then deleted it. Because I didn't need to hear his voice anymore. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even focused on revenge at that point. I was focused on rebuilding myself. I started writing more. I shared stories from others with their permission. I created a blog to help women protect themselves in the workplace. What started as pain had become purpose. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was a final notice from the EOC. It said the case had been officially resolved in our favor. Each of us would receive a financial settlement. It wasn't a massive amount. But it wasn't small either. It was more than money. It was justice. The company admitted no guilt, of course. They never do. But they had agreed to several changes: new HR leadership, employee protections, anonymous complaint systems, and mandatory training. I smiled reading the letter. Because I knew deep down, they were changing because they had to, because we made them. I thought about where I had started. A young woman with big dreams, just hoping to make her parents proud. And how one powerful man tried to crush me, piece by piece. But in the end, he lost. Not because I screamed the loudest, but because I didn't give up. I had help. I had truth. And I had the courage to fight back. Quietly at first. Then with fire. 6 months after the article came out, everything in my life started to change. Not all at once. Slowly. Gently. And this time, it was real change. The kind that comes after surviving something painful. The kind that sticks with you. I found a new job. It wasn't a big company. Just a small, women-led agency focused on non-profit marketing. The pay wasn't huge, but the people were kind. The boss respected boundaries. The work was meaningful. During my first week, I met my new manager. Her name was Alicia. She shook my hand and said, "We value honesty here. If you ever feel uncomfortable, speak up. You'll be heard." I almost cried right there. It was the first time in years that I didn't feel afraid of going to work. I started seeing a therapist too. She helped me process the trauma. I told her how I blamed myself for not speaking up sooner. For being quiet. For letting it happen. She looked at me and said, "Emma, you didn't let it happen. You survived it. And then you stopped it from happening to others. That's power." I carried those words with me. They became my armor. Chloe, one of the women from our lawsuit, started law school. She sent me a message saying, "I'm going to make sure people like him don't win again." You inspired me. That meant more to me than any headline ever could. Another woman, Grace, got a job at a big tech firm. They read her story and hired her because of her strength. She told me, "Your fight made space for me to speak." I'll never forget that. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were leaders. I still had hard days. Sometimes I'd hear a voice that sounded like David's and feel my stomach twist. Sometimes I'd open my inbox and worry there'd be a cruel message waiting. But those days became fewer. And when they came, I reminded myself of the truth. He lost. I didn't. One evening, I went back to the place where this all started. The Bright Point building was still there, but it had a different name now. New owners. New people. I stood across the street, sipping coffee, and watched people walking in and out. A young woman walked past me, smiling, holding a portfolio. I wondered if it was her first day. I hoped she'd be okay. And I realized something. Maybe what I did would help protect her. Maybe someone like David wouldn't get past the front door this time. That thought made me smile. A few weeks later, I got an invitation to speak at a local university. They asked me to talk about workplace harassment and how to protect yourself. At first, I hesitated. Then I remembered the girl I used to be. The one sitting in the bathroom stall, crying quietly, wondering if she was crazy. I didn't want anyone else to feel that alone. So I said yes. That day, I stood in front of a room full of students. And I told my story. From the beginning. From the job offer to the humiliation to the quiet revenge that brought it all crashing down. And at the end, I said something I truly believed. I said, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. It happens in courtrooms, in articles, in policies that never existed before. And it happens when people like you speak up. You don't have to scream to win. You just have to stand. The room went quiet. And then, they clapped. Not for me. For themselves. For the strength they had too. Now, I live a quieter life. I work. I write. I rest. Sometimes people message me saying they read my story. They ask, how did you do it? I always say the same thing. I didn't do it alone. I had people beside me. I had the truth. I had courage I didn't know I had. And if you're listening to this right now, you have that courage too. Never let someone make you feel small. You are not the problem. You are the beginning of the change. If this story touched you, please like the video and subscribe. And if you've ever had to stand up to someone who tried to break you, share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop standing up for yourself.